Gotham City, a breeding ground for the broken, the twisted, the monstrous. But what happens when the monsters aren't just lurking in the shadows, but are born from the very heart of the city's institution? Machin's methods might be questionable, but his diagnosis of societal problems often rings true. This creates a fascinating dynamic where Batman, the symbol of order, is forced to grapple with the validity of Anarchy's criticisms. Is Batman truly serving justice, or is he merely propping up a corrupt system?
What do you want from me?
Fear. I can smell it.
This internal conflict adds layers to Batman's character, pushing him beyond simple crime fighting and into the realm of social responsibility. First off, we have Lonnie Machin. The original Anarchy embodies a potent blend of philosophical and physical threat that challenges Batman on a deeper level.
And you don't even have the decency to play your part.
He's not just about chaos, he's a mirror reflecting society's ills.
I am Anarchy, voice of the people.
Anarchy's actions, though extreme, force us to confront uncomfortable truths about militarization, environmental damage, and social inequality. He's the embodiment of youthful rebellion against a system perceived as broken, a system Batman, in his own way, upholds. Anarchy's appearances in other media have showcased his potential, but a return to comics would allow for a deeper exploration of his ideology. Imagine a storyline where Anarchy systematically dismantles corrupt corporations polluting Gotham, forcing Batman to choose between upholding the law and protecting the city's well-being. Or perhaps Anarchy exposes a government conspiracy, leading to a clash of ideals that shakes Gotham to its core. Beyond his philosophical significance, Anarchy is a formidable opponent in his own right. He's a master strategist, a skilled fighter, and a technological genius capable of creating gadgets that rival Batman's own. His unpredictable nature and willingness to cross lines make him a constant threat, pushing Batman to his limits. Sadly, Anarchy has been largely absent from the comic book page. After a brief appearance in Detective Comics 38, 2015, where he was quickly defeated, his last significant role was a tragic demise in I Am Batman 1, 2021. This unceremonious end does a disservice to a character with so much potential. Now is the perfect time to bring Anarchy back. With people feeling more and more frustrated with the way things are, his message of challenging the system is more relevant than ever. He can be the voice of those who feel left behind, forcing Batman and the readers to confront the harsh realities of our world. Anarchy's return would bring fresh ideas and excitement to the Batman comics. He's a villain who makes us think and question the world around us, and that's something we need more of in comics today. The Arkham family's history is inextricably intertwined with the grim and gothic legacy of Arkham Asylum. Grant Morrison's graphic novel, Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on a Serious Earth, masterfully explores this connection, delving into the profound theme of inherited madness that has plagued the Arkhams for generations. This curse, originating with the family matriarch Elizabeth Arkham, casts a long shadow over the narrative, shaping the destinies of her descendants and the institution itself. Elizabeth, tormented by her own severe mental illness, unknowingly passed this harrowing legacy onto her son, Amadeus. A brilliant architect, Amadeus was driven by a noble, albeit misguided, ambition to create a sanctuary for the mentally ill. However, his own deteriorating mental state warped his vision, ultimately leading him to become a patient within the very walls he built. This tragic irony underscores the insidious nature of the Arkham family curse, as it consumes its victims from within. The cycle of madness doesn't end with Amadeus. His nephew, Jeremiah Arkham, initially presented as a beacon of hope for the asylum, a seemingly stable and compassionate administrator determined to break the cycle of despair. Yet he too falls prey to the family's dark inheritance. Jeremiah's obsessive belief that every patient could be cured, a noble aspiration in itself, becomes a dangerous delusion, blurring the lines between sanity and madness. His descent into insanity mirrors that of his predecessors, highlighting the inescapable grip of the Arkham family curse. The theme of generational madness extends beyond the walls of Arkham Asylum, impacting the wider Batman mythos. In the wake of Batman's supposed death in Final Crisis, Jeremiah's fragile psyche shatters completely. He assumes the identity of the Black Mask, a ruthless criminal mastermind embracing the darkness that had always lurked beneath the surface. Though this particular storyline was later retconned, it serves as a chilling testament to the destructive potential of the Arkham legacy. Even with the New 52 reboot, Jeremiah's significance within the Batman universe persists. He is later revealed to be the father of Astrid Arkham, the comic book incarnation of the Arkham Knight, a formidable adversary who emerges to torment Batman in the wake of the Joker's apparent demise. This revelation further solidifies the enduring impact of the Arkham family's tragic history, demonstrating how the sins of the past continue to haunt the present. The rich history and compelling character arc of Jeremiah Arkham make him a prime candidate for inclusion in future Batman stories. His connection to the Arkham family legacy, his descent into madness, and his potential for both good and evil offer fertile ground for captivating narratives. Reintroducing Jeremiah would allow for a deeper exploration of the Arkham family's curse, its impact on Gotham City, and its connection to Batman's own psychological landscape. In the vast and ever-evolving universe of DC Comics, few villains are as intriguing and multifaceted as Clayface. While modern interpretations often portray him as a shape-shifting behemoth capable of mimicking anyone and wreaking havoc with his malleable form, the character's origins are far more grounded in reality. The original Clayface, Basil Karlo, was not a product of radioactive accidents or mystical transformations, but rather a man driven to madness by his own obsession and insecurity. Introduced in the golden age of comics, Karlo was a renowned actor, celebrated for his chilling portrayal of Clayface in the stage production The Terror, and his starring role in the horror classic Dread Castle. However, Karlo's career took a tragic turn when he learned that a remake of Dread Castle was in production without him. Consumed by envy and a desperate desire to reclaim his former glory, Karlo donned the Clayface mask and embarked on a murderous rampage, targeting the cast and crew of the remake. This original incarnation of Clayface, devoid of any supernatural abilities, presented a unique and terrifying threat. He was not a monster from another world or a victim of circumstance, but a human being driven to the brink by his own inner demons. Karlo's descent into madness served as a stark reminder that the most frightening villains are often those who lurk in the shadows of our own society, masked not by fantastical powers, but by the banality of everyday life. While subsequent iterations of Clayface have embraced the concept of shapeshifting and body horror, the essence of Basil Karlo's story remains relevant and compelling. In a world where Batman faces a constant barrage of outlandish and otherworldly threats, the grounded horror of an ordinary person driven to murder serves as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can reside within the human heart. The story of Basil Karlo also highlights the enduring appeal of Batman as a character. While he is undoubtedly a superhero with extraordinary abilities and resources, his greatest strength lies in his ability to confront the darkness that lurks within both himself and others. Batman's Rogues Gallery is a reflection of the human psyche, a collection of individuals who have succumbed to their deepest fears and desires. By confronting these villains, Batman not only protects Gotham City, but also reminds us of the importance of facing our own inner demons. Zooming in on the 10th spot, we have the one and only Doughboy, a villain so absurd he'd be comical if he weren't so dangerous. Imagine the Pillsbury Doughboy, but instead of delicious pastries, he's serving up a heaping helping of pain. This pliable pugilist was brought to life by Arnim Zola, a name that should send shivers down any Marvel fan's spine. Doughboy is the ultimate contortionist, able to stretch his body into any shape imaginable, making him a slippery opponent. He might look soft and cuddly, but this guy's a heavyweight who can fly, making him a surprisingly formidable, albeit incredibly strange, adversary for the Star-Spangled Hero. His existence is a testament to the sheer weirdness that lurks within Captain America's world. First appearing in Invaders #7, Baron Blood clashed with Cap and his wartime allies, the Invaders, cementing his place in the Captain America mythos. Adding another layer of intrigue is his familial connection to the British hero, Union Jack, who is, in a shocking twist, Baron Blood's own brother. This familial connection adds a whole other dimension of tragedy and conflict to an already captivating villain. At number 7, prepare to face the chilling embodiment of hatred itself, the Hate Monger. This villain is not just a symbol of intolerance. He's a literal clone of Adolf Hitler, genetically engineered by the nefarious Arnim Zola to spread his toxic ideology. Hatemonger is a weaponized version of bigotry, capable of manipulating minds and inciting violence with his venomous rhetoric. He's a horrifying reminder of the real-world evils of the past, a living testament to the dangers of unchecked prejudice and the insidious power of hate speech. His very existence forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the responsibility of science and the ever-present threat of history repeating itself. Hatemonger serves as a stark warning that the seeds of hatred once sown can take root and blossom into something truly monstrous. Hissing his way into the 6th position is the serpentine supervillain, King Cobra. This isn't your average reptile enthusiast. King Cobra was once a brilliant scientist delving into the secrets of anti-venom. However, a fateful encounter with a radioactive cobra transformed him into a living weapon, granting him enhanced strength, incredible agility, and of course, venomous fangs that would make any snake charmer envious. He's a formidable foe, able to slither through tight space and strike with lightning speed. King Cobra is a recurring thorn in Captain America's side, often joining forces with other villains, proving that sometimes the most dangerous creatures are those that lurk in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He embodies the classic trope of science gone awry, showing how a quest for knowledge can sometimes lead down a dangerous and very scaly path. Powering up at number 5 is the mechanically menacing Machinesmith, a villain who blurs the lines between man and machine. This technological terror isn't just a skilled engineer, he's a master of consciousness transfer, capable of shifting human minds into computers and downloading them into new, often robotic bodies. He's a walking, talking testament to the potential dangers of unchecked technological advancement, wielding his mastery of robotics and artificial intelligence to create deadly machines and androids. Machinesmith is a constant challenge to Captain America, not just physically, but also philosophically, forcing Cap to grapple with the very definition of humanity in an increasingly digital age. His most infamous feat was transferring She-Hulk's consciousness, proving his abilities and his threat extend beyond Captain America. Machinesmith represents a chilling vision of a future where the human spirit could be reduced to mere data, a chilling concept Cap must battle. Cloaked in shadows at number 4 is the enigmatic Mother Knight, a villainess who embodies the very essence of mystery. Her past is a blank page, her powers a closely guarded secret, and her motives a riddle wrapped in an enigma. She's a master of manipulation, a whisper in the darkness, pulling strings from behind the scenes. What little we know about Mother Knight only adds to her mystique. She's a formidable opponent for Captain America, a mistress of espionage who can infiltrate the highest levels of power without leaving a trace. Her presence in Cap's world is a constant reminder that sometimes the greatest threats are the ones you never see coming, the ones that operate in the murky realm of secrets and lies. She is the unknown, the unseen, and that's what makes her so dangerous. Needling his way into the 3rd spot is the prickly Porcupine, a villain who's as dangerous as he is, well, spiky. This isn't your average woodland creature. Porcupine is encased in a high-tech battle suit, a walking arsenal covered in razor-sharp quills. But these aren't just for show. He can launch them as projectiles, turning himself into a living, breathing pincushion of pain. And if that's not enough, his suit can also emit debilitating sonic blasts, making him a formidable foe in close-quarters combat. Porcupine is a tough nut to crack, both literally and figuratively, a testament to the ingenuity and absurdity of Captain America's rogues gallery. He's a recurring antagonist, often lending his unique brand of prickly power to larger villainous schemes, proving that even the most seemingly ridiculous foes can pose a serious threat. Taking the penultimate spot at number 2 is Sin, a villain who embodies the legacy of hatred, as she is the daughter of Captain America's arch nemesis, the Red Skull. She's inherited her father's twisted ideology and burning animosity for everything Captain America stands for, making her a deeply personal and formidable foe. Sin is no mere carbon copy of her father. She's a skilled fighter and a cunning strategist in her own right, capable of leading her own terrifying team, the Sisters of Sin, on a crusade of chaos. She represents a dark reflection of Captain America's legacy, a chilling reminder that even the noblest ideals can be perverted and passed down through generations, transforming into something truly monstrous. Sin's existence is a constant battle for Cap, not just against her physical prowess, but against the very idea that his greatest enemy's hatred can live on, poisoning the future. Claiming the top spot as the most obscure Captain America villain you need to know is the flag-draped fanatic himself, Super Patriot. This jingoistic villain is a warped parody of everything Captain America represents, a dark reflection of patriotism twisted into something ugly and dangerous. He's a master of propaganda, a charismatic manipulator who uses the very symbols of American pride to incite violence and sow discord amongst the populace. Super Patriot is a chilling reminder that even the most noble ideals, like love of one's country, can be weaponized, turning into tools of division and hatred in the wrong hands. He embodies the dangers of unchecked nationalism and serves as a cautionary tale about the power of propaganda to manipulate and mislead, even to the point of participating in illegal acts such as the January 6th insurrection, making him a disturbingly relevant villain in today's world.
The friendly neighborhood web slinger has been swinging since 1962. It's hard to remember everyone he swung at. Let's see if we can get those wheels turning, ladies and gentlemen. Clear any brain fog and you will soon learn that there were 3 villains referenced in this intro. The superiority complex this man has is almost laughable. The gentleman is his name, but he is literally anything but. His real name is Gustav, and he is the type that is considered a threat even in the underground. He also, and this is where the superiority complex comes in, he believes that he is part of a superior group and that most people in the world are simply wastes of space, and the only thing they provide to society is being cannon fodder. He is a villain, I'll give him that. His absolutely wild connection to Peter Parker, he was almost the guy that killed Peter's parents. He was trying to get Logan, but Peter's parents stepped in. In retaliation, the gentleman alerted another bad guy about the Parkers, and then that guy ended up being responsible for the parents. The gentleman did request for Peter's life to be spared so Peter could be a later challenge. It's messed up. He did learn about the accident that made Peter Spider-Man and even kind of protected the kid by ending anyone who knew Peter's identity. So he did good things in really twisted ways and bad things in twisted ways. If he does something, it's probably twisted. For all his superior thinking, he was just a regular human, no superpowers. His only power was financial power as he was rich. He did have a bodyguard named Pity with the ability to create darkness. This villain has 5 known appearances in the comics, but what would have been a major role in the Amazing Spider-Man films. I love those movies, and the cliffhanger they were left on, I think about it once a week and get upset. The gentleman appeared in the mid-credits scene in the first movie, and after the big fight in the second movie, he's presumably the one hinting at forming the Sinister Six in that franchise. I'm so mad we never got to see it. Fog literally slipped through our fingers. He does have a power. He can turn his body into green fog on command. He can make his body dense to an extent as well, like a ghost that can touch things and choke things. The villain is described as a slippery ghost of mist. He uses his powers to assist him in his line of work, that being a contract slayer. He actually started out as just a regular human that had a not so regular line of work, but when he was set to end a physicist, an explosion in the lab gave him his powers. He didn't work alone though. His partner in crime literally was Knight, but we will talk about him next. The duo was hired by Kingpin to take down the Arranger, and they did, and that's what brought Spider-Man into the mix. Spidey chased the criminals down and defeated them by knocking them out. That all happened in the Spectacular Spider-Man issue 165 to 167 in 1990. No one knew where they went for the longest time after this until 2004's Marvel Knights Spider-Man. They had a very small cameo in the scene where Venom is being introduced. After that, again, where are they? Moving on to the other half of the destructive duo, Knight, spelled like a medieval knight because that is what he was. The power he got from the lab explosion was the ability to turn himself into a knight, the medieval man of armor. The knight form is a very strong suit. It can resist most forms of harm, except for lots of electricity. That's what Spidey used to knock them out in that previously mentioned comic. Also, just so you know, the characters' real last names are Fog and Knight. This was always in the cards for them. In the comics, it's theorized that the characters turned into their last names because that was how they saw themselves. So one thing about Peter's story is that he's bullied. He gets bullied in high school, right? We all know that. What if I told you there was someone who got bullied even more? Not to make this the Pain Olympics, but Peter is losing to Charles Wiederman, later Molten Man. He became Molten Man when he attempted to create a vibranium skin suit that would protect soldiers from any impact. The guy cut corners though, which led to the vibranium in the lab to blow up and attach itself to Charles Charles. Now Charles was coated in vibranium and has all the powers that vibranium does. Unfortunately, the suit and the lab had a bunch of chemicals in them, and Charles's mental stability is soon holding on by a thread. He goes around on a slaying spree to find former classmates that bullied him. He took out a few people and burned down Peter's apartment. He's nothing if not thorough. Eventually, Peter realized that vibranium, Molten Man himself, can be hardened under extreme pressure, so Peter trapped Molten Man in a pressurized chamber which caused Molten Man's body to harden and prevent him from moving. The good news is, Charles volunteered to get tested on for a cure to metals-wearing people. Happens more often than you think in Marvel, and he was cured, lived happily ever after. Big Wheel is the villain, and he drives a, you guessed it, big wheel. His last name is also Wheel, so we should have seen this coming. Jackson Wheel was a villain even in his everyday job. He was a businessman, specifically a corrupt one that embezzled money. He hired this other villain called Rocket Racer to steal the evidence of his crimes, but Racer withheld the documents and asked for more money. He told Wheel that his jet-powered skateboard was going to keep at Wheel's case until he paid him. Wheel decided to hire the Tinkerer to create a weapon for him to fight the skateboard. That weapon was the Big Wheel, a large monowheel equipped with armor and various weapons. The Big Wheel and Spider-Man fought for the first time when Spider-Man was fighting Racer, actually. Wheel was after Racer and chased him through traffic, flattening cars on the way. The Racer led Big Wheel to the water, and just before Racer was going to get crushed and pulled in, he was pulled out by Spider-Man and the wheel fell into the Hudson River. He survived and would go on to cause chaos for various other heroes, including Spider-Woman. In total, Big Wheel has just under 20 appearances. The name Draco, when I say that, you probably think of the blonde from the Harry Potter series, but that name also belongs to an interesting Spider-Man villain. Q Drake was a scientist, winning a Nobel Peace Prize for his work in the field of biology. The man would turn out to be anything but peaceful though, and honestly was just the lizard in a different font. Drake's research project was combining iguana genes with humans, tested it out on himself, and became Draco the Dragon. He walked like a man but had the fire of a dragon as well as poisonous gas. He was huge and had these massive wings when there was this meteor shower, and that's when Draco first appeared, so it looked like he had flown down into space. Also a play on the Draco constellation there. To top it off, he made such a grand entrance he declared he wanted to rule the Earth. Classic move. Spider-Man and Draco ended up fighting at the top of the Empire State Building, and when Draco fell off, he transformed into a little iguana and disappeared into a wall. That's it. This story was part of this thing Marvel Comics did in the 1970s, where they released a story on record instead of on the page, so it's no wonder he slipped away and we haven't seen him again. This guy makes me so sad. He was a villain at first, but he didn't want to be. Mindworm was born with his powers. They weren't good powers, so he was set up from the start. He had the ability to drain mental energy from people around him. His other powers were mental based too, like telepathy and mind wave blasts and illusions. He was also known to invade dreams, be a natural genius, and when he drains energy, he could do that to the point of death, but he didn't want to do that. Though he wasn't strong physically that much, he could absorb so much energy and make himself very strong, even strong enough to fight Spider-Man. The character has less than 10 appearances and has lived quite the heartbreaking life in those 10 appearances. When he was born, he didn't know how to control his powers. He was literally a baby, so he accidentally made himself an orphan. In the orphanage, people started calling him Mindworm. He aged out and moved to a neighborhood in New York where he could harmlessly feed off the residents. He was found by Spider-Man and the two fought each other. Spidey won, they fought again, and Spider-Man won again, but double won this time because Mindworm realized that he wanted to be a good guy. Unfortunately, Mindworm was taken advantage of by some goons and went to jail. He couldn't hold down a job after jail and became homeless and was eventually beaten on the street and passed before Spider-Man could help. It was really sad. R.I.P. Mindworm. Polestar, or Thomas Duffy, has had about 2 appearances, which means there really isn't much to tell here. He first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man 409 in 1996 and then died that same year in Spider-Man Unlimited 14. What did he do in that short time? Well, he was a player in the Great Game. Polestar, Rhino, and Joystick teamed up together to fight the friendly neighborhood web-slinger. Polestar wore a suit that generates a magnetic field, allowing the villain to attract and repel whatever he wants to fight with. It's also resistant to Peter's webbing. Of course, even 3 against 1, Spider-Man came out on top and Polestar went to jail. Eventually he got out but was shot in a different battle and perished. This fashion icon should be in the pages of Vogue, not forgotten. Belladonna, also known as Madame Belladonna to distinguish from another character with the same name, was an American in Europe. She opened a fashion design business with her sister and all was well, slaying the game, until this man came along and ruined everything. Roderick Kingsley, hashtag not my Roderick, came along and stole the sisters' designs and took them to America to sell. Also, Kingsley later became the Hobgoblin, so he sucks literally across the board. Madame Belladonna was rightfully very angry about her stuff being stolen and put together a team of henchmen to track the goblin down. The team found him and attacked, but Spider-Man swooped in to save the guy because he was just a defenseless human at this time after all. There were a series of fights until finally Belladonna and her henchmen were webbed up by the spider and left for the authorities. Belladonna only appears in 3 issues: Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man 43, 47, and 48. And we don't know where she is, if she's designing prison jumpsuits, I don't know. Other characters are now named Belladonna and have no correlation to her. Of what's been shown, Belladonna has no superpowers, but she is very good at chemistry and of course design. She has a gas gun that can render someone unconscious. She will also put this gas in perfume bottles for a more high fashion look. The gas and her name come from the belladonna plant. Sticks and Stones are the villains here. They had very different origins but are both super cool. So Sticks was originally homeless and not doing well, so when Stone's team of scientists showed up looking for homeless people to experiment on, Sticks was all for it since it paid well. It gave him way more than he bargained for though. His trial resulted in him becoming a living cancer. Anything he touched would rot away. Stone has powers like that too, plus his genius scientific mind, and he has a bunch of weapons. The difference between Sticks and Stones is that Sticks rots organic matter and Stone rots inorganic matter, so together they are the worst. To make everything even more unsettling, Sticks can make his fingers longer, all the more easy to grab things to rot. The pair debuted in Amazing Spider-Man 309. They have fought not just Spider-Man, but also Deadpool. Deadpool is the choice to fight these guys, I think. The pair have about 10 appearances.
Number 10, Mr. Sinister. We were so close to getting Mr. Sinister in a film. He was hinted at in Fox's The New Mutants, which was basically held hostage for quite some time after the merger between Disney and Fox happened, and then when it was released, it didn't do so well. I still feel like there was stuff that was meddled with there, despite Josh Boone swearing that the cut that got released was basically untouched by the studios and was totally his intended cut. I do not buy it. I'm sorry, Josh Boone, I don't believe you. One of the things the film sets up though is a property where Nathaniel Essex could study mutants and even turn them into his weapons under the guise of helping to rehabilitate them. This place was known as the Milbury House, which was of course Mr. Sinister's ancestral home in the comics, and Milbury is actually a name that he uses while traveling abroad in the comics after becoming Mr. Sinister, kind of like one of his undercover names. It was the surname of his wife, Rebecca. It would be really cool to see a movie that solely focuses on Sinister, as he's such a complex character, and recently there's also been a sort of like Jekyll Hyde element added to his origin story that I think could make for a great X-Men horror film spinoff. And considering that's kind of what the New Mutants felt like it was doing, it was like a little bit like teen coming of age as well as a horror film. I really want that to happen. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, do not miss out on all of our cool content. Make sure you click that subscribe button and ring that bell so you get all of our notifications. Number 9, Mr. Freeze. While Mr. Freeze has made a few appearances in live action, he has never had his own solo film. He is one of the most complex villains around, which is why I think he would actually be a pretty admirable candidate overall. Mr. Freeze would be an interesting character to explore, considering he was made to be so altruistic in terms of his reason for villainy, and over the years he's just like become like more and more altruistic. However, some have taken him too far, I would say, to the side of sympathetic villain, and it would be nice to see a film that more finely strikes a balance on kind of where he stands between being a villain but also like having his reasons. For those who are unaware, Mr. Freeze isn't just a man obsessed with cryogenics. He's a man and scientist whose interest in cryogenics turned to obsession after his wife Nora was diagnosed with an incurable disease. Rather than then lose her, he decided to freeze her until he could find a cure. And there's also been other versions of the story where it's not just about him helping her. She may not even have been his wife. They may have never been married. He might just be obsessed with this woman. So there's lots of layers you could play with there. And his whole goal is apparently to protect Nora, preserve her, protect her, and that tends to be his motivation for turning to crime in terms of how he and his story are depicted in the modern era. Now, whether or not she's actually his wife, you could play with that, I think, in the film. I think it could be interesting. Number 8, Arcade. I was just thinking about Arcade the other day when I was doing a reaction to the new Saw film trailer. It's interesting to me how this idea of playing a game where the stakes are at their most high with lives on the line is kind of a universal concept at this point. We see this idea echoed across various films and projects, a perversion of the concept of a game. Look at Battle Royale, Hunger Games, Squid Game, Saw, fun in games to an extent, Ready or Not, and honestly so many more. Arcade is a villain who embodies this twisted idea. He likes to trap people in his own vicious game, often devising an elaborate maze or landscape of death traps typically known as Murder World. While he's not the most powerful villain out there, he's definitely super interesting, and he represents a concept that people universally seem to be both attracted to and kind of repulsed by, which can make for a very interesting film. Number 7, Kite Man. Kite Man might be flying a little higher now that he's become a fan favorite thanks to his appearance in the Harley Quinn animated series, but we still have yet to get a live action version of this character. Honestly, the Harley Quinn animated series has also left me wanting more Kite Man as well. That combined with the amazing cosplays that I've seen based on that version, it's honestly inspired me to want to see Kite Man on a big screen. I could definitely see Kite Man fitting easily into James Gunn's DCU, that's for sure. So maybe James Gunn will give us a Kite Man movie. That would be kind of interesting. I think people would love it. I think it would be as successful, if not more successful even maybe than Peacemaker. Number 6, Madeline Pryor. Obviously, I can't talk about villains who deserve their own movie without highlighting one of my personal all-time favorites, Madeline Pryor. I also may selfishly want her to have her own film so I can get the chance to play her, but honestly, she's one of the greatest characters out there. So even if it wasn't me but someone else in that role, I would still be just super excited to have her up on the big screen. But Marvel, if you're watching, I have the skills and I would be happy to step into the Queen of Goblin's shoes if you would have me. Why does Madeline Pryor deserve her own film? Because she is one of the most complex villains out there. While she is a clone of Jean Grey, Madeline shies away from letting this define her or her character. And I'd even say there are layers baked into her character in actually relation to Jean and her relationship with her. She resents Jean, but she also admires her, putting her up on a pedestal. She also despises her, but at the same time, Maddie would not exist without her. Like I said, she may be Jean's clone, but that doesn't simplify anything for her character. It actually makes her more complex. Number 5, Poison Ivy. Poison Ivy has always been considered a classic character, and yet we haven't had a live action adaptation of her on the big screen for some time. We've seen her pop in here and there in TV shows, but I'm still waiting for the next big project where she can really soak up the limelight. Ideally, a very lime green limelight. I feel like a solo Poison Ivy film could be a great way to introduce Pam to an even larger audience in 2023 or beyond, and what better time for an eco-terror villain, honestly, or an eco-horror film, perhaps, than right now. This is basically what we're just dealing with on the everyday. So there's a lot you could play with, and I feel like people would be super here for it mentally. Number 4, Destiny. Destiny is a villain that until recently most folks had forgotten about because she was dead. In the films, she doesn't even really exist. And while I didn't mind the weird love triangle turned kind of love square in the X-Men First Class films between Mystique and Magneto and Professor X and Beast, I would like to acknowledge that those films pretty much erased one of Mystique's most important relationships from the comics. If not, I would say the most important relationship. The love between her and her wife, Destiny. Destiny for many years was allied with Mystique, and together they even adopted Rogue, with her being their daughter that they raised together. I would love a feature film that showcases Destiny and also highlights the love story of her and Raven. It would really be nice to have, considering how for so many years comic book censorship actually prevented them from even being a firmly established couple role in the comics, despite that always being Chris Claremont's intentions for their relationship with one another. Like literally, they were supposed to be the moms of Nightcrawler, and then that never happened. It's all censorship, baby. Number 3, Brother Blood. Brother Blood has recently had a comeback in the comics with his reappearance in the current Titan series. He's posing as a reformed villain currently, but I, for one, I'm skeptical about that. Honestly, he's just too good of a villain for him to be reformed in my eyes, and I'm hoping we get to see just how bad he truly ends up being, fingers crossed. Brother Blood is widely underappreciated, and even the recent live-action version of his character in Titans didn't really stand by himself, with him having direct ties to Trigon, who is his father in the show, instead of just worshipping Trigon. Like, I know he's always been somewhat connected to him, but he wasn't his son before. At least not any version of him that I've known in the comics. I personally feel Brother Blood stands on his own and prefer his own more bloodied past in the comics. I would love to see this version of his story brought to life in a standalone film. Honestly, it'd probably be pretty terrifying. Like, Brother Blood is scary, and he just doesn't get enough hype. Like, he's awesome in a scary way. Number 2, Doctor Doom. I mean, Doctor Doom isn't really so much forgotten by many of us. He is admittedly beloved by so many fans, but when it comes to the MCU, it does feel like he's been forgotten. He's one of the greatest, most complex villains around, and yet we haven't seen a live-action adaptation of him in years. So I'd argue when it comes to the films, at least, he has been forgotten. I would love to see a version of this character as a lead in his own film. Honestly, I don't even think you would actually even need to start with his origin. Doom has such a rich history as a character, there are many points you could feasibly begin his story from and focus on. I'd even say you don't necessarily need to have the Fantastic Four in his film. Now, while the FF did help to shape him, in the modern era, he's very much a villain who stands on his own and who could easily be matched up to fight against any hero. And also you could play with the fact of like him being a villain, but there also being some heroic elements, I would say, to who Doom is at times. Number 1, Clayface. Clayface is one of those villains who I don't think honestly just gets featured enough, and definitely has not been featured enough on the big screen. That is for sure. The interesting thing about Clayface, at least in regards to the main version of the character I'm most familiar with, Basil Karlo, is that he can transform into pretty much anyone he wants, which makes him an exceedingly interesting character in terms of how he could be depicted on the big screen. You could either have a series of different actors playing him as sort of a collective, or one actor who just gets to basically become the master of disguise, which honestly would probably be super fun. Either way, I think he's very intriguing in terms of his abilities. He is also surprisingly complex, having been redeemed a few times over the years, and even becoming, for a time, a member of the Bat family. Cavalier actually started out as a vigilante with a prowess in fencing. He was even shown to be better than Batman at fencing. In fact, Batman decided to let him remain operating as a vigilante after clashing with him, but Cavalier was pulled into a life of crime after falling in love with a woman who was responsible for taking a life. In the end, he was forced to surrender and choose to give up his life for the woman that he loved. Honestly, while kind of a weird villain, I feel like Cavalier doesn't get enough love. His character and story could have evolved into something really cool, it could have continued, but instead, the only other time that we see him, primarily, other than of course Legends of the Dark Knight and Blackest Night, where he comes back to life because Blackest Night, is in a Suicide Squad series during the Prime continuity, where he's basically used as cannon fodder for the purpose of their story. Because Suicide Squad. What villains do you feel don't get enough love in the comics? Let me know down in the comments. Just because you are considered a low-level thug, or in Fleet Delmar's case, a supposed freedom fighter, doesn't mean you can't rise above your rank and become something much greater. That is just what Fleet did. He ended up getting his hands on some alien tech that allowed him to move up to the next level when it came to his rank as a threatening and powerful Batman villain. He was supposedly apprehended by Batman years before, who had tormented him with fear gas as punishment for his crimes. This experience apparently led to him losing his eyes and becoming blind, which is why he decided to seize the alien tech and use it to get revenge. The helmet he wore granted him psychic powers, allowing him to read the minds of his opponent and counteract their attacks easily in a fight. The helmet also allowed him to absorb energy blasts, which at one point allowed Karma to take on both Black Lightning and Batman at the same time. Hush has managed to pull off some of the most horrific schemes over the years and gotten under Batman's skin skin many times, and Catwoman's skin even, quite literally, when he stole her actual beating heart. Thomas Elliot is not only a powerful villain because of his intense vendetta against the Wayne family and Batman, but because he also is often shown to have the skill and the strength to match Batman, as well as the cunning. He has taken Batman on in hand-to-hand combat and fared surprisingly well, and he's managed to set into motion outlandish plots like impersonating Bruce Wayne by giving himself plastic surgery to make himself look nearly identical, then capturing and threatening the real Bruce Wayne's life and threatening to disfigure him so that he could just permanently take his place. And yet still, Hutch is one of Batman's lesser known villains, simply because he's really only had a few prominent moments in the comics. While Punchline might be new on the scene, she did go toe-to-toe with Harley Quinn, herself known for being a pretty deadly and unstoppable villain when she wants to be. Hello, Harley Quinn did take on the Holy Trinity all together at one point, and Punchline, when she faced Harley Quinn, she came out on top. Surprisingly, Punchline sliced Harley Quinn's throat and left her for dead in the sewers below Gotham during Joker War. But of course, Harley would recover because she is still Harley frickin' Quinn. Still, Punchline's victory was surprising for her being such a new and unseasoned character and baddie. So I think we learned then that she is a force to be reckoned with and is definitely a character to keep our eyes on. Punchline seems to enjoy fighting with stiletto daggers and dreaming up her own deadly brews of poison, even creating her own special brew of Joker venom during Joker War for Batman, which gave him his own pretty bad trip. Pretty much everything about Owlman from Earth 3's crime syndicate is surprising and intriguing. He is the evil counterpart to Batman, but is not Earth 3's version of Bruce, technically. Instead, he is Thomas Wayne Jr., who on his Earth was Bruce's elder brother. He himself plotted to kill his parents as he believed they were mismanaging the family's wealth, which of course would end up being his inheritance. In the end, Bruce refused to help Thomas and even attempted to convince him to not go through with his plot. So Thomas Jr., saddened, was ultimately forced to take his brother's life, having had much higher hopes for Bruce. Thomas would then become Owlman and use a combination of fear, wealth, and influence to take control of Gotham. Still missing his brother at this point, he decided to find someone else to fill that hole in his heart. After meeting Dick Grayson at the circus, Thomas orchestrated the death of Grayson's parents in secret and then offered him support and a home, manipulating him into becoming his sidekick, Talon. Honestly, I love Dr. Phosphorus and I think he does not get enough love. One, he's got such a cool and unique design, and two, I also kind of feel for him in regards to like his origin story. Dr. Phosphorus was once a nuclear scientist, Dr. Alexander Sartorius, who just wanted to bring nuclear power to the people of Gotham. And yeah, I know back in the day we were all concerned about nuclear power, but it is one of the cleanest forms of energy, okay? So I don't think really he was doing anything too sinister here. However, he was resisted at almost every turn as the people of Gotham protested his efforts. Eventually though, he was able to build his plant, but he was simply forced to build further away from the city on the sea. The plant tragically did have a meltdown, which resulted in him being transformed into the monstrous-looking Dr. Phosphorus. Sartorius, I believe, saw Gotham as the enemy since they had so vehemently opposed him, forcing him to relocate his plant. And so he decided to get revenge on the city, but of course he was stopped by Batman, and would be thereafter. Kite Man is often relegated to the C-list villains in the DC universe. He's often considered one of Batman's lamest villains, and yet via the Harley Quinn animated series, he saw kind of a revitalization of his character, with him even getting a solid fan base due to how he was depicted in the show. Kite Man, while an all-around good guy in the animated series, is still considered to be a villain in the animated universe and the comics, albeit still of course a C-list one. And yet in the animated show, I feel like what makes us love him so much is the fact that he's working hard to try and make a name for himself, and that's kind of a huge part why I think people love him in the show. That and the fact that he seems fairly comfortable with just who he is, even though he isn't necessarily, you know, a top tier villain and he knows it. It doesn't mean that he doesn't try, and it doesn't mean that he is ashamed of who he is, or even his gimmick. Hell yeah, Kite Man. Brother Eye in Future's End is an entity that takes over the world. Brother Eye was initially created to be a hero protecting the world from any threat. In Future's End, the artificial intelligence was created by Batman and Mr. Terrific, but its prime directive ended up kind of corrupting it. In DC's main continuity, Batman created the AI to keep an eye on the Justice League, who he had basically lost trust in at that point. Brother Eye came to realize that humanity's greatest threat was actually, Well, humanity itself, and sought for complete control of the people of planet Earth, seeing this as the only way to protect humans from themselves. It's that age-old AI warning story. Be careful what you wish for. Creating AI technology may one day result in that tech rising up and realizing just how awful humans can really be, and either hold you prisoner for the rest of your life, or ultimately just kill you, because maybe the world would be better off that way. You know that age-old story. Peacekeeper 01 is a character who has made a few appearances in the comics, still being relatively new. He was introduced during Tinian IV's run and was one of the people recruited by the Magistrate in Gotham to keep peace in the city. He was in fact one of many peacekeepers recruited, but most importantly, he was of course the first, 01. Peacekeeper 1 was also unique in the sense that he was recruited specifically to take Batman's place as Gotham's protector. Sean Mahoney was originally an aspiring police officer, coming from a long line of those who worked in the service. However, due to a troubled youth and some serious anger problems, I'd say, he was refused by the GCPD when he applied, instead ending up working at Arkham. Following the events of A-Day, he would be recruited by Simon Saint, who of course was working for the Magistrate, to act as the first candidate for the Peacekeeper program. Sean, as Peacekeeper 01, possesses cybernetic enhancements which make him strong, tough, and a formidable opponent whose tech allows him to learn and improve every time he fights someone. This was one whose reappearance even caught me by surprise during the Three Jokers story. While I am not sure if we know where that story falls in continuity yet, in continuity, outside of continuity, it was a still long-awaited read that I quite enjoyed, and which brought back a villainous sidekick of old that I did not know how much I really missed until I saw him return. Gaggy is Gagsworth A. Gagsworthy, and he is an old school sidekick of the Jokers from way back in the day before he was ever with Harley Quinn. In fact, at one point, Gaggy also returned to get revenge on Harley for taking his place at the Joker's side, but that happened, I believe, during Gotham City Sirens. In Three Jokers, however, Gaggy returns as one of the Three Jokers' sidekicks. However, his comeback is quite short-lived, as he ends up being devoured by a Joker shark. Rest in peace, Gaggy. What a tragic way to go.
Kicking it off with Queen Bee, or Hive Queen, either works. Queen Bee was one of the 20. She was abducted by Brainiac and mutated, made into a powerful telepath with an extreme devotion to Brainiac. She thought she was his daughter. He turned out to be horrible, shocking, I know. He retreated eventually and just left the 20 mutated devoted people to perish. Some did, but most made it out alive, including, of course, the it girl Queen Bee. She came to Earth to prepare for his return in quite an interesting and modern way, using the Holistic Integration for Viral Equality social media company as a front. She would kidnap people that had psychic powers and then harvest their powers, so when the time came, the entire Earth could be taken over mentally. Some notable Queen Bee battles were against the Teen Titans, Red Hood, and Wonder Woman. She fights using her telepathic abilities, but has many other tricks up her sleeve, including flight, which makes sense if she's a bee, energy projection, intelligence, telekinesis, and casting illusions. She is also capable of regeneration. There are a few different people who have taken on the name Queen Bee. This one is from Prime Earth. She first appeared in Superman Volume 3/21 and has had about 12 appearances total. I don't know why I'm including this villain here because his name is a mouthful, but he's funny and cool. So here's Onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is the type of person to only target and take out a specific type of human. Onomatopoeia's chosen genre of human is non-powered heroes. He calls himself Onomatopoeia because he imitates every sound he hears. Something creaks, he will make a creaking sound. I like to imagine that Onomatopoeia has a human voice, and when he is making the sound, it isn't a perfect replica, it just sounds like a man doing a poor imitation of a creaking door. But probably his suit is tricked out and has some sort of cool feature that makes him parrot things well. Onomatopoeia wears all black, which is good. If he is going to announce himself using his voice whenever he hears a weird noise, the least he could do is be hard to see. Onomatopoeia has been arrested quite a few times and has faced off against the Teen Titans and Robin. In total, he has about 15 appearances. Crystal Frost went from one cool name to another when she became Killer Frost. Killer Frost was a villain to Firestorm. When she was Crystal, she was a university student who fell in love with her teacher. Her teacher did the right thing and refused her romantic advances, but that hurt her feelings a lot, and she held a grudge like she was born to do so. Post-college, Crystal was part of a scientific project in the Arctic that went super wrong. Crystal accidentally got trapped in a thermofrost chamber. Her time in there made her into a colder version of herself, a killer version of herself. She can now project powerful blasts of freezing cold and generate cold from her body. Unlucky for Firestorm, heat does little to hurt her, it actually makes her stronger. She has displayed the ability to freeze water droplets in the air. This might cause an opponent to freeze in place or trap someone with ice. She can create ice daggers and create such a cold environment and impede someone's ability to think. I don't think you will believe her weakness though. It's cold. If she gets too cold, she will go into a coma. She will basically hibernate. Remember how I said she held a grudge against that one prof that didn't like her back? Well, her first order of business once turning into a supervillain was to attack him. Luckily by that time, he was already part of the hero Firestorm. This Crystal Frost exists from 1950 to 2011 and she had about 19 appearances. I would join this villain squad purely because of their name and then regret it later. They are the Snake Gang. Each member is based on, you guessed it, a type of snake. So we have Cottonmouth, Copperhead, Asp, and Lady Viper. Lady Viper is kind of like the team's leader, but they take orders from Oracle. The Snake Gang, they fight Batgirl and the Birds of Prey. That is also the name of the comics, Batgirl and the Birds of Prey. The villains have snake-esque powers to go with their names. Cottonmouth elongates in battle and grows fangs, similar to the snake he's based on. His mouth goes white and presumably is filled with venom. Copperhead is very strong and tries to get his arms around his victims to constrict airflow. He also likely has a venomous bite. Asp is kind of like the guy in the chair for the group who is also in the field. He's the one that stays in contact with Oracle and calls for backup when the gang needs it. Lady Viper has the ability to change her legs into a snake tail. When she does so, she can see in the dark. When she is in this half snake state, she hates bright light. She has claws, fangs, and an attitude. Copperhead has appeared the most out of the four with 31 appearances. Asp and Lady Viper are tied with 5, and Cottonmouth died in issue 3 of the comic, so he only had 2. Askana is an alien shapeshifter that primarily faces off against Hawkman. She debuted in Hawkman 2. She was an agent for Dr. Hogarth Kane. The form she usually appears in is like a human woman. For her big fight with Hawkman above the streets of New York though, she is stuck in this like green lizard looking form, but half her face is still human. In this form, she is very strong, punching through walls. She also has sharp claws. She is a Hawkman villain, but a bit misunderstood. The reason she fought Hawkman in the sky was because she had to make sure he was a good fighter. He was. The reason she is on Earth is because she was wrongfully accused of committing crimes on her home planet and had no choice but to escape. Aksana has only appeared in the Savage Hawkman comics so far and has about 5 appearances to her name. Someone who is the same but different. We have Spinebender. He is actually a crime committer. He steals. He can get away with his crimes because he is also a shapeshifter. Spinebender has fought various members of the Bat family. He was first up against Batgirl when he stole a bunch of microchips. The chips were important because they had power that rivaled the chips powering the Batsuits from Q-Corps. He made it all the way to Miami before he was found out by Batgirl and Nightwing. He held a grudge against Nightwing for that and later went looking for him to try and eliminate him. In the scuffle between those two, Spinebender broke a street light that electrocuted him to the point where he should have died, but he didn't die. Spinebender is still out there and currently he has 3 appearances to his name. Animal Man's comics are weird enough, but issue 28 actually hurt my eyes to read. So the next 2 obscure villains are Front Page and Notional Man. Animal Man 28 is the first and last appearance for Front Page. He either was born with or grew into looking like the front page of a newspaper. He looks like if a mummy was wrapped in newspaper headlines instead of bandages. He holds his own in hand-to-hand combat and his weapon of choice appears to be a rolled up newspaper, but his main power is the news headlines on him. They mess with his opponents psychologically. Depending on who he is fighting, he is covered in disturbing headlines about that person. Usually it's covering their death. Seeing the disturbing headlines about himself activated Animal Man's animal instincts and he smacked Front Page with his own paper, and now the only headlines Front Page shows are about his own death. As for Notional Man, he made it to 2 appearances. He dressed in all white and is shown to have a heightened sense of smell, like he can smell feelings like guilt and grief and love. He carries around lots of surgical equipment that he uses to fight, his forceps being his favorite tool. Notional Man dresses in a very fashionable suit, and I don't know why. His origin was that he was a phantom pregnancy. When someone wants a child so bad, they imagine they are pregnant when they really aren't. So he is essentially a phantom person. Animal Man also brutally takes him out and his body turns into sludge, I think. That's the end of it. Shazam and Cyborg had to work together to subdue Zookeeper Zookeeper and his Beast Force. Zookeeper is relatively new, debuting in 2016. He appears to have mechanical body parts and excellent fighting skills. He is the leader of a group of animal men. He calls them Beast Force. Some of the animals on his team are a pit bull, warthog, cheetah, bear, gorilla, crocodile, and tiger. He literally has a whole zoo of them. Any animal you've seen in a zoo, just assume they are on Beast Force. The animals all have armor and big guns, plus all the weapons their natural biology affords them, like claws and fangs or tusks. We don't see much of the battle with the animals, but we do get to see the final bit. Cyborg sends out a powerful blast, and Shazam is pictured perched on a pile of the animal men things at the end. Zookeeper is arrested, and currently this is his only appearance. Plastic Man's comics give us the gift of some of the most ridiculous villains, and I could not be more grateful. Today we are looking at Carrot Man. Carrot Man was in a live studio audience for the game show Let's Make a Steal. The audience for that show, usually they dress in fun costumes, so Carrot Man chose to wear a carrot costume that day. He started out as just a regular guy. The show's prize for the moment was a blender, and the person that won it was so excited she won that blender that she for some reason threw the blender into the audience. It smacked Carrot Man right in the head. It hit him so hard it awakened his inner evil, and that was that. He now had no choice but to commit a crime. Also, he passed out and no one cared. No one called an ambulance, so I don't really blame him for the inner darkness awakening. Carrot Man is new at being a criminal, so he announced on camera the crime he would commit and challenged Plastic Man to stop him. We know probably how the crime went. He went to jail. Carrot Man had a happy ending though. After escaping from jail, he hit his head again and went back to his old personality.